Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to be doing Sci-Fi Remote Lesson 8, which is The Beautiful People Part 2. So hopefully if you are viewing this, it is Wednesday and you're doing what you need to do. So you're going to read Part 2 of The Beautiful People and answer questions based on the textual evidence. You're going to compare ideas of conformity and individuality between this story and Anthem. And you're going to watch a video on conformity and answer questions based on that situation. So here you have the text that we're going to be using today, and if you need it for the form, the video that is embedded in the form is right here should you need it if it doesn't load in the form for any particular reason. So this is the text for The Beautiful People Part 2. As always, your words in bold are going to be your vocabulary words. Anything on the side that is not in bold, such as this here, those are the notes that I am using to lecture from when I explain this to you. I would also have your form open on the side of either your video or your text so that as you are going, you can answer questions. There's absolutely no reason for you to be, not looking up the answers as you're going. That way you know that you're going to pass. So just a reminder, what we read last time, this takes place in a society where everybody has this plastic surgery to make every single person in the society absolutely beautiful. Many of them look alike. No one has any distinct individuality because nobody has any imperfections. And Mary, who is the main character of the story, she wants to be different than everybody else. She doesn't want to look the same. She doesn't want to have the same face, have the same body. She wants to remain individual, and everybody in the society, her doctors, her mother, her boss, every single person wants her to have this surgery, but she is refusing to do that. All right, so that's basically where we are, where we're picking up, and we're gonna start from there. The office was quiet and without shadows. The walls gave off a steady luminescence, distributed the light evenly upon all the desks and tables, and it was neither hot nor cold. Mary held the ruler firmly and allowed the pen to travel down the metal edge effortlessly. The new black lines were small and accurate. She tipped her head, compared the notes beside her to the plan she was working on. She noticed the beautiful people looking at her more furtively than before, and she wondered about this as she made her lines. A tall man rose from his desk in the rear of the office and walked down the aisle to Mary's table. He surveyed her work, allowing his eyes to travel cautiously from her face to the draft. Mary looked around. "Nice job," said the man. "Thank you, Mr. Wilmot. Dralic shouldn't have anything to complain about. That crane should hold the whole damn city." "It's very good alloy, sir." "Yes. Say, kid, you got a minute?" "Yes, sir." "Let's go into Mullison's office." The big, handsome man led the way into a small cubby-hole of a room. He motioned to a chair and sat on the edge of one desk. "Kid, I never was one to beat around the bush. Somebody called in a little while ago, gave me some crazy story about you not wanting the transformation." Mary said, "Oh, Daddy had said it would have to happen someday." This must be what he meant. "I would have told them they were way off the beam, but I wanted to talk to you first to get it straight." "Well, sir, it's true. I don't. I want to stay this way." The man looked at Mary and then coughed embarrassedly. What the hell? Excuse me, kid, but I don't exactly get it. You saw the psychiatrist?" "Yes, sir. I'm not insane. Dr. Hortle can tell you." "I didn't mean anything like that." "Well," the man laughed nervously, "I don't know what to say. You're still a cub, but you do swell work. A lot of good results. Lots of comments from the stations. But Mr. Poole won't like it." I know what you mean, Mr. Wilmot. But nothing can change my mind. I want to stay this way, and that's all there is to it." "But you'll get old before you're half through life." Yes, she would. Old like the elders, wrinkled and brittle, unable to move right. Old. It's hard to make you understand, but I don't see why it should make any difference. Oh, don't go getting me wrong now, it's not me. But, I don't own Interplan. I just work here. Mr. Poole likes things running smooth, and is my job to carry it out. And soon, as everybody finds out, things wouldn't run smooth. There'll be a big stink. The dames will start asking questions and talk. Will you accept my resignation, Mr. Wilmes? Sure you won't change your mind? No, sir. I decided that a long time ago, and I'm sorry now that I told Mother or anyone else. No, sir, I won't change my mind. Well, I'm sorry, Mary. You'd be doing awful swell work. Couple of years you could be centraled in one of the asteroids the way you've been working, but if you should change your mind, there'll always be a job for you here. Thank you, sir. No hard feelings? No hard feelings. Okay, then. You've got till March, and between you and me, I hope by then you've decided the other way. Mary walked back down the aisle, past the rows of desks, past the men and the women, the handsome model men and the beautiful, perfect women. Perfect, all looking alike, looking exactly alike. Sat down again and took up her ruler and pen. So basically what Mr. Wilmes is saying is that if Mary chooses to remain normal, people would talk and people will, gossip, and the boss isn't going to like that, and she could be fired for it. So, he's asking her if she changed her mind, and she just decides that she's going to quit instead because she wants to stay herself. Now, today, we have laws against this in the workplace, against workplace discrimination based on looks and age and gender and things like that. But, clearly in this society, they don't have anything like that. And for Mary, being her own person is more important than a job. Even though she has potential to do well in this job, she still doesn't care. It's not, her idea of what's right for her. So this is a huge consequence that she's willing to take for something that she believes in. Mary stepped into the elevator and descended several hundred feet. At the second level, she pressed a button and the elevator stopped. The doors opened with another button and the doors to her unit with still another. Mrs. Kuberl sat on the floor by the TV, disconsolate and red-eyed. Her blonde hair had some slightly askew and a few strands hung over her forehead. You don't need to tell me. No one will hire you. Mary sat beside her mother. If you only hadn't told Mr. Wilmes in the first place. Well, I thought he could be a little sense into you. The sounds of the TV grew louder. Mrs. Kuberl changed channels and finally turned it off. So in this case, we find out that her mother has called Mr. Wilmes to try to talk to her and try to talk her out of her decision. So she doesn't respect this decision that Mary has made, and she's finding it very hard to accept it. What did you do today, Mother? Mary smiled. Do? What can I do now? Nobody will even come over. I told you what would happen. Mother, they say you should be in the circuses. Mary went into another room. Mrs. Kuberl followed. How are we going to live? Where does the money come from now? Just because you're stubborn on this crazy idea. Crazy, crazy, crazy! Can I support both of us? They'll be firing me next. Why is this happening? Because of you, that's why. Nobody else on this planet has ever refused the transformation, but you turn it down. You want to be ugly. Mary put her arms about her mother's shoulders. I wish I could explain. I've tried so hard to. It isn't that I want to bother anyone, or that Daddy wanted me to. I just don't want the transformation. So at this point, Mary's not only sacrificing her own job and her own reputation, but her mother is also seeing backlash from this. People won't come over. She's afraid that she's going to be fired. And because of that, they could lose their home, and things like that. So this is most likely why Mary's mother doesn't support her decision, because it's not only happening to Mary, but it's happening to her mother as well. Mrs. Kuberl reached into her pockets of her blouse and got a purple pill. She swallowed the pill. When the letter dropped from the chute, Mrs. Kuberl ran to snatch it up. She read it once, silently, and then smiled. Oh, I was afraid they wouldn't answer. But we'll see about this now. She gave the letter to Mary. Mrs. Zena Kuberl, Unit 451D, Levels 2 and 3, City. Dear Madam, in response to your letter of December 3rd, 36, we have carefully examined your complaint and consider that it requires stringent measures. Quite frankly, the possibility of such a complaint has never occurred to this department, and we therefore cannot make positive directives at the moment. However, due to the unusual qualities of the matter, we have arranged an audience at Central Dome, 8th level, 16th unit, January 3, 37, 23 sharp. Dr. Elf Hortel has been instructed to attend. You will bring the subject in question. Yours, Department F. So it makes you wonder, what did Mrs. Kuberl request? What is she asking for that involves Mary? Is she asking that Mary be forced into this, or is she asking for leniency? Mary let the paper flutter to the floor. She walked quietly to the elevator and set it for level 3. When the elevator stopped, she ran from it crying into her room. She thought and remembered and tried to sort out and put together. Daddy had said it, Grandpa had, the books did. Yes, the books did. She read until her eyes burned, and her eyes burned until she could read no more. Then Mary went to sleep, softly and without realizing it for the first time. But the sleep was not restful. Ladies and gentlemen, said the young-looking, well-groomed man, this problem does not resolve easily. Dr. Hortel here testifies that Mary Kuberl is definitely not insane. Doctors Monach, Prynne, and Fetters all verify this judgment. Dr. Prynne asserts that the human organism is no longer so constructed as to create and sustain such an attitude through deliberate falsehood. Further, there is positively nothing in the structure of Mary Kuberl which might suggest difficulties in transformation. There is evidence for all these statements, and yet we are faced with this refusal. What, may I ask, is to be done? So these people don't really see Mary as a human being. They call her an organism and a structure. So they don't respect her humanity and her human wishes at this point. Mary looked at a metal table. We have been in session far too long, holding up far too many other pressing contingencies. The trouble on Mercury, for example. We'll have to straighten that out somehow. Throughout the rows of beautiful people, the mumbling increased. Mrs. Kuberl sat nervously, tapping her shoe and running a comb through her hair. Mary Kuberl, you have been given innumerable chances to reconsider, you know. Mary said, I know, but I don't want to. The beautiful people looked at Mary and laughed. Some shook their heads. The man threw up his hands. Little girl, can you realize what an issue you have caused? The unrest and the wasted time? Do you fully understand what you have done? Intergalactic questions hang fire while you sit there saying the same thing over and over. Doesn't the happiness of your mother mean anything to you? So it makes you wonder, what does this matter have anything to do with those other pressing things that he talked about, except that they are spending too much time in this council meeting trying to solve a simple girl's lack of wanting the transformation versus dealing with huge political intergalactic problems. Okay. A slender, supple woman in the back row cried, "We want action! Do something!" The man in the high stool raised his hand. None of that now. We must conform, even though the question is out of the ordinary. He leafed through a number of papers on his desk, leaned down and whispered into the ear of a strong blond man. Then he turned to Mary again. Child, for the last time, do you reconsider? Will you accept the transformation? No. The man shrugged his shoulders. Very well, then. I have here a petition signed by 2,000 individuals and representing all the stations of Earth. They have been made aware of all the facts and have submitted the petition voluntarily. It's also unusual, and I'd hoped we wouldn't have to, but the petition urges drastic measures. The mumbling rose. The petition urges that you shall, upon final refusal, be forced by law to accept the transformation, and that an act of legislature shall make it universal and binding in the future. Mary's eyes were open, wide. She stood and paused before speaking. "Why?" she said loudly. The man passed a hand through his hair. Another voice from the crowd. "Seems to be a lot of questions unanswered here." And another. "Sign the petition, Senator." All the voices. "Sign it! Sign it!" "But why?" Mary cried. The voices stilled for a moment. Because, if you'd only tell me that. Tell me! Why, it simply isn't being done, that's all. The greatest gift of all, and what if others should get the same idea? What would happen to us then, little girl? We'd be right back to the ugly, thin, fat, unhealthy-looking race we were ages ago. And there can't be any exceptions. So, basically, because Mary has one more refusal, now the senators have decided that they are going to take this petition that the citizens signed, and they're going to force Mary into the transformation, and anyone else in the future who refuses the transformation by law will not be allowed to refuse it, and they will be forced into it as well. So at this point, you kind of have to look at this. Is Mary doing more harm than good at this point? What do you guys think? Think about that. Stop and think about that for a second. If this were you, would you think that you would want something for yourself and your own decision, or would you go along with it just because the rest of society wants you to? Would you conform to that? Is she being selfish, or should she stand up for what she believes in? And this old, what they call ugly, thin, fat, unhealthy looking race, is that so bad? That sounds normal. That sounds like what we have. And there's nothing, ugly about it. But, this is the way they think in this story on this, in this society. Maybe they didn't consider themselves so ugly, the mumbling began anew. "That isn't the point," cried the man. "You must conform." And the voices cried, yes, loudly, until the man took up a pen and signed the paper on his desk. Cheers, applause, shouts. Mrs. Cuberell patted Mary on top of her head. "There now," she said happily. "Everything will be all right now. You'll see, Mary." All right, so in the end, she's forced into this transformation, and her mother is very happy about that. The transformation parlor covered the entire level, sprawling with its departments. It was always filled, and there was nothing to sign, and no money to pay, and the people were always waiting in line. But today the people stood outside, and there were still more looking in through doors, TV cameras placed throughout and tape machines in every corner. It was filled, but not bustling as usual. Mary walked past the people, Mother and the men in the back of her following. She looked at the people. The people were beautiful, perfect, without a single flaw. All of the beautiful people, all the ugly people, staring out from the bodies that were not theirs, walking on legs that had been made for them, laughing with manufactured voices, gesturing with shape and fashioned arms. Mary walked slowly despite the prodding. In her eyes was a mounting confusion, a wide, wide wonderment. The reason was becoming less vague, and fuzzed edges were falling away now. Through all the horrible months and all the horrible moments, the edges fell away, and now it was almost clear. She looked down at her own body, and then at the walls which reflected it. Flesh of her flesh, bone of her bone, all hers, made by no one, built by herself or someone she didn't know. Uneven kneecaps making two grinning cherubs when they bent, and the whole familiar rubbing together of the inner fat thighs. Fat, unshapely, systematic Mary. But Mary. So Mary kind of realizes at this point that no matter what the people look like on the outside, they're still the same people on the inside. And Mary is kind of the only one to really look at that. But are they really the same people? Do they feel the same way? Do they think the same way? So that's something we have to look at as we continue to go throughout the story. Of course, this was what Daddy meant, what Grandpa and the books meant, what they would know if they would read the books or hear the words. The good, reasonable words, the words that signified more, much more than any of this. The understanding heaped up with each step. Where are these people? Mary asked half to herself. What has happened to them? And don't they miss themselves, these manufactured things? She stopped suddenly. Yes, this is the reason. They have all forgotten themselves. The curvaceous woman stepped forward and took Mary's hand. The woman's skin was tinted dark, chipped and sculpted bone into slender rhythmic lines, electrically created carriage, stance, made, turn out. All right, young lady, we will begin. They guided Mary to a large curved leather seat. From the top of the long silver pole a machine lowered itself. Tiny bulbs glowed to life and cells began to click. The people stared. Slowly a picture formed upon the screen in the machine. Bulbs directed at Mary, then redirected into the machine. Wheels turning, buttons ticking. The picture was completed. Would you like to see it? Mary closed her eyes tight. It's really very nice, the woman turned to the crowd. Oh, yes, that's great. That's a great deal to be salvaged. You'd be surprised. A great deal. We'll keep the nose, and I don't believe the elbows will have to be altered at all. Mrs. Cubrel looked at Mary and smiled. Now it isn't so bad as you thought, is it? She said. The beautiful people looked. Cameras turned, tapes wound. You'll have to excuse us now. Only the machines allowed. Only the machines. The people filed out. Mary saw the rooms in the mirror, saw things in the rooms, and the faces and bodies that had been left, the woman and the machines and the old young men standing about, adjusting, readying. Then she looked at the picture in the screen and screamed. A woman of medium height stared back at her, a woman with a curved body and thin legs, silver hair, pompadoured, cut short, full sensuous lips, small breasts, flat stomach, unblemished skin. A strange, strange woman no one had ever seen before. The nurse began to take Mary's clothes off. Jeff, the woman said, come look at this, will you? Not one so bad in years. Amazing that we can keep anything at all. The handsome man put his hands in his pockets. Pretty bad, all right. Be still, child. Stop making those noises. You know perfectly well nothing is going to hurt. But what will you do with me? That was all explained to you. No, with me! Me! Oh, you mean the cast-offs? The usual. I don't know exactly. Somebody takes care of it. I want me, Mary cried. Not that! She pointed at the screen. So at this point, she's really afraid that she's going to lose her inner self, like all of the others, and she's afraid of losing her identity. And she asked, so what do you do with the rest of me, meaning the parts of her that they take away? And she's like, oh, somebody takes care of it, whatever. But before that, the nurse calls like another doctor or, orderly or someone into the room, and they're making fun of her. They're removing her clothes and they're making fun of her because she doesn't look like everybody else. And she still wants to be her own person. Her chair was wheeled into a semi-dark room. She was naked now, and the men lifted her to a table. The surface was like glass, black filmed, a big machine hung above. Straps, clamps, pulling, stretching limbs apart. The screen with the picture brought in, the men and the women the men and the woman were women now. Dr. Hortel in a corner, sitting with his legs crossed, shaking his head. Mary began to cry above the hum of the mechanical things. Shh, my gracious, such a racket. Just think about your job waiting for you and all the friends you'll have and how nice everything will be. No more trouble now. The big machine hurtling downward. Where will I find me? Mary screamed. When it's all over! The long needles slid into rough flesh and the beautiful people gathered around the table. They turned on the big machine. So, at the end of this story, stop and think about, how do you think Mary will be as a person after her transformation? Do you think she's going to remember anything about her former self? Do you think she's going to remember anything about her father or the books that she read? Or is she just going to become some mindless drone like everybody else in society? That's kind of an interesting idea to think about. So now that you've finished reading the story, you're going to go back to the assignment and you're going to finish your form. And within the form, there is a short video about a conformity exercise from Brain Games. And you're going to watch that and answer the questions that go with that, and then you will be done for today. All right, guys, have a wonderful day, and I will see you soon.